New Zealand's border has closed, leaving hundreds of asylum seekers who were expected to arrive here this year now stranded outside of the country. And had they made it here, it's likely some of them would have ended up behind bars almost immediately, like 21-year-old Assad, who managed to get here before the pandemic unfolded.
When I came here, I ended up in prison. I didn't know what I do. I was crying. It was very, very difficult life for me.
Alone, scared, and 13,000 kilometres away from the ongoing Somali civil war, which killed his entire family when he was just 6 years old. When he arrived at the border with no contacts and nowhere to go, he ended up sleeping at Auckland's international airport for 2 nights.
I didn't know where to go. I was waiting my friend to help me. I didn't know what to do. Then airport security came to me asking me, why are you sitting here? Why are you staying here for too long? I explained it to him, then he took me to immigration.
Just days after arriving, Assad ended up at Mount Eden prison. It was 7 months until corrections decided to release him. The Asylum Seekers Trust says New Zealand has got this process wrong.
So they're using a criminal prison to detain asylum seekers who arrive at our border. It's really, really tough on them to be put in with criminals in a jail. They're not treated any differently as a special immigration case. They don't get a trial. They haven't committed any crime. They've simply come here looking for a safe place to live.
That's Tim Maurice, Chief Executive of the Asylum Seekers Support Trust. And he's among many advocates who've been calling for an end to the imprisonment of asylum seekers here in Aotearoa. On average, those imprisoned spend 7 months behind bars. But not every case is like that.
But we've currently got an asylum seeker who's been in jail for 3 years from claiming asylum. So that's the longest case, but we're hoping that he will be released today, actually. So we're going to court after this to hopefully sign some documents and get him released.
Last year, 510 asylum seekers reached our border. That's the highest number this country has seen in 16 years. Before the border closed, that number was set to be even higher this year. About 80 asylum seekers have been locked up here over the past 5 years. The Trust is trying to help asylum seekers who are in prison as much as they can, but Tim says Corrections refuses to let them know when an asylum seeker has arrived in prison, citing the Privacy Act. It means the Trust has to largely rely on word of mouth from imprisoned asylum seekers they're in touch with, who have met others like them inside.
In prison, I was crying, I was stressed. I don't know what to do because those people are, most of them, they are criminals. They are fighting inside the prison. They are fighting inside the cell. So it was a bad experience.
It's a tough environment. When I visit the people in prison, you can sort of see some of the criminals maybe toughened. They've been there before. They kind of know how to be staunch and how to walk and act. The asylum seekers just have no idea. And the stories we hear of what happens to them, the nice ones are their foods get spit in, they get beaten up. Physical, there's cases of sexual abuse in the prison as well, because it's 2 people to a cell and they're locked up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon till 8 in the morning.
And after the trauma of being in prison, there are even more challenges to face outside. 21-year-old Yahya was released from prison after 7 months and had nowhere to go. The Trust says Corrections placed him in a taxi and sent him to a local mosque. There, a Somali shop owner contacted Red Cross for help. Now Yahya lives at one of the Trust's hostels where he's trying to build his new life. Every story is different.
So we've got one man here who was accepted as a refugee in November and then released from prison. He's been staying with us since then. He still doesn't have a work visa and he has not in any stage since he got released in November been given any money or support from the government. So he's accepted as a refugee, released from prison. He's been staying with us for free. We've been giving him $40 a week for food and donated food that we get in, and he's just been waiting for the process. We just struggle. Why would we accept somebody and say, you're safe here, you don't have to leave, we've accepted your case, and then we give them no support? I think it should be immediately, here is a visa issued, at least within a week. This will allow you to access some government support and allow you to go work.
Can he claim a benefit?
No, he cannot claim a benefit because he doesn't have a visa.
Asylum seekers once accepted here are entitled to a work visa and can receive the emergency benefit and temporary additional support. But they can't access that support until immigration issues the visa. Tim says many of them end up waiting weeks, if not months, for it to arrive, and they're forced to live on any charity they can get. When Assad arrived at the hostel at short notice, just before the lockdown, the trust only had one bed. He had to sleep in the living room until a room became available just last week.
Yeah, I sleep here. It was a big difference. I had freedom for the first time in 7 months.
But despite the government accepting Assad into this country, asylum seekers like him are treated differently to the refugees who come under New Zealand's United Nations refugee quota.
There's two different types of refugees in New Zealand. So we have our quota refugees who come into the Mangere Refugee Centre, and they get 6 weeks of acclimatisation training, and they get provided for house, either via House New Zealand or private, and they get a year's of volunteer support and social work support and counselling and medicals. So they get a little bit of help. They get access to a resettlement grant from Work and Income. So those are the quota refugees. What we call convention refugees, which are successful asylum seekers. There's around 250, there was around 250 last year. They get a letter saying congratulations, and that's it. They have to apply for residency, which can take up to 2 years.
Tim says he'd hoped that under the Labour government things would improve. Instead, he says they've gotten worse. Immigration processes are taking a lot longer than usual, and despite contacting Minister Ian Lees-Galloway several times, the Trust says it's received no response. Now, due to the impacts of COVID-19, asylum seekers are suffering even more and are finding themselves at the tail end of those most vulnerable.
So a lot of them lost their jobs, and then unfortunately, due to a Work and Income website, they were unable to apply for benefits online. So when Work and Income closed their offices, they said everyone apply online, but one of the first questions they asked is, are you a resident? And they said, no, I'm not. Because when they get accepted as a refugee, they're still not residents until they're 2 years later sometimes. So they said no, and then the form stopped. They were unable to apply. So they said, ring the help centre. Of course, the first week you couldn't get through to the help centre. Everyone's ringing, so for a whole week they were unable to get through. When they finally got through, because the call centre was nationwide, they were getting staff that didn't know who asylum seekers or convention refugees were. And they were getting responses like, go see your embassy, you're not entitled, maybe you should go home, when they were entitled. So it put a lot of...
You're saying WIN's giving out the wrong information?
Yeah, it's just a lack of training, because previously we would take people to local WINS offices and they started to understand the rights of asylum seekers and would be with them. Now, of course, when it went nationwide call centre, you're getting staff who'd never come across asylum seekers before. And so without referring to their manual, they were rejecting the claims.
Tim says some asylum seekers have now gone months without income, and others have had their visa applications halted in the COVID-19 crisis. When Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern addressed New Zealand after the Christchurch terror attacks last year, she acknowledged that many of the victims were refugees.
They have chosen to make New Zealand their home, and it is their home. They are us.
They are us. Those very words which went viral ring empty inside the halls of this hostel, where Tim says that sentiment is lacking. He's calling on the government not to forget the plight of asylum seekers here, even amidst the COVID-19 crisis.
Give them some respect, give them enough support, financial, give them the ability to work, which is what they've come here to do, and understand that they're coming here to escape from persecution and fear.
Yeah, I'm hoping for a good future, a better future. I like to study, to do something better, you know. We are not criminals. Yeah, we came here for our safety. Yeah, if our country is safe today, we don't need to go to another country to seek asylum or to be a refugee or to treat it differently. So we came here for a reason. Now, we are not criminals, we are just seeking home.